So I'm Michael Platt. I am 15 years old and I own a baking business called Michael's Desserts. And basically, for every dessert that I sell, I give one away to someone in need. And we work a lot around food insecurity and making sure that everybody has access to like everyone has equal access to food. So we do a lot around just kind of like working with organizations and working with people in my community and giving donations to people and things like that. And just kind of all around the idea of making sure that everybody has access to food. And I also bake.
So, you're in many ways, you're a regular kid with, differences in hobbies, and some other changes that allowed you to do these amazing things. But how did all of this start?
So I guess I've always kind of been baking or doing something, and I've always kind of been the person to like have a business off of something. I remember like me and my brother, we sold loom bracelets that were like
Mhm.
football team colors for like the Super Bowl one year, and it was just it was really interesting. But I guess I've always kind of like had the idea to like have a business. And when I started baking and I knew people enjoy what I was cooking and that I was good at it and that I like doing it as well, kind of like my first instinct was to have a business off of what I like to do. So that's what I did. I started a business, started like making a logo and everything. And my parents kind of supported me and stuff like that. And then that's how kind of it all started.
Now, baking is super fun.
Yes.
What's the thing in baking that was so intriguing for you that kept you going?
So I feel like in the beginning specifically, I guess I've always kind of like been in the kitchen helping with something or doing something like with my family members, cooking with my grandmother, cooking with my mom and stuff like
Mhm.
that. Um, but I also really love science and baking specifically was kind of like a mixture of both cooking that I had been really like in like kind of like involved in and science was something that I've
Yeah.
been interested in. So kind of something that I already kind of knew how to do and something that I was really interested in doing and kind of just put those things together and I got baking. And then over time, I kind of developed more of like a idea on how and why baking works, things like that, and like the very scientific like parts of that. So that kind of just kind of like perfectly merged both of my interests that I had at the time, and of course they've evolved. I like just kind of like the art around baking and things like that. But I still think that the first
Yeah.
thing that kind of like grabbed my attention about baking was how it was kind of like a mixture of something that I knew how to do, something that I enjoyed doing and had been doing practically my whole life, and something that I was really interested in doing.
Yeah. Why did you have a specific interest for science?
I don't really know. I guess it's just I like mixing things together, and just kind of like doing like the reactions and like chemistry and things like that. And I guess I've always like science like for a long time been my favorite subject, just because it's a lot. It's very hands-on. Like out of the most like kind of like
Yeah.
like book smart subjects. I feel like science is the more hands-on version of that. So I
Yeah.
really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Mhm. Would you say you enjoyed like the creativity part of science, which then came into baking?
Yeah, I definitely think that I like the creativity that you can do when it comes to baking because, of course, you have to follow like rules, but once you know those rules, you
Mhm.
can kind of like use them to your advantage. So you can do things that no one else has ever done by just kind of like mix matching things. So that I feel like that is really cool. You can be like really personal with baking and basically like what you're making is something that no one else
Mhm.
is going to make just like how you do it, especially if you know why things work, because then
Yeah.
you can use the thing. Like if you wanted to make a certain dessert have a certain feel, then if you know why it like why it has like the like why it does different things, then you're going to know how to manipulate that dessert so that it matches the feel that you want it to have. So it's kind of like the rules that you have when it comes to like science, things like that, but as well the creativity that you can do if you
Mhm.
know those rules.
So you had this interest for baking and all the creativity that comes with it. right?
Yes.
And a lot of kids have interest in things like baking, maybe a sport. But then normally after a little bit, that interest will kind of start dying off. But you actually did the opposite and took that interest and made it into something pretty huge. So after you discovered your love of baking, what did you do next?
After I discovered that I liked baking, I just got good at it. I feel like baking is a very, very, very broad subject, and there's always new things to learn about it. So when I kind of like had kind of like gotten things
Mhm.
down, I'm also the person who kind of like masters things before I move on to like the next thing. I don't like have a lot of things up in the air at one time. So I'll like sit down
Yeah,
and do something until I am really, really good at it and really comfortable with it, and then I'll move on to the next thing. And with baking, there was a lot of things that I had to get comfortable with in order to get really good at it. So that was kind of like the approach that I took specifically when it comes to
yeah,
baking, was just learn one recipe and figure out why it works, figure out how you want it to be,
yeah.
and then just keep doing that until you're comfortable with it, and then move on to the next thing. And the amount of things that I have moved on to, the amount of things that I still can learn, kind of just kept my attention with it, and I kept getting better at it, and I kept using the knowledge that I had to help me to learn the things that I'd like to learn.
Yeah. And did you learn all these new autism techniques, maybe even some recipes? Did you learn them, by yourself through things like YouTube, or did you go out and get like a class of some sort?
Mostly YouTube. Just like something that I had seen. I'm like, oh, what's that? And then I'll just kind of like make things up in my head. But especially in the beginning, it was mostly YouTube videos,
Mhm.
and also my mom, because she is was a home economics teacher, and she basically like knew and helped me
Yeah,
specifically when it comes to like the basics of baking, when it comes to like measuring things and just different things like that. Just like the really basic things when it comes to baking. And that really helped me in the beginning. But after that, I kind of moved on and used what she had taught me to learn more things that I was interested in learning. But most of that I got off YouTube. Yeah.
all right. So, how long about after you started your interest in baking would you say you became pretty, pretty expert in the subject?
Um, I feel like okay, the first time that I was really like confident with something that I made was in 2019. And it was like it wasn't a recipe that I had seen, and it was a very much like kind of like um depending on like flavor combinations. And it was basically I call it like I think I made like three desserts that I consider like the perfect dessert.
Mhm.
um and this one was the first dessert that I made, and I feel like that was definitely the part where I was like, hold on, like I really know what I'm doing. And that was definitely really like
Mhm.
it was definitely, it made me happy, because I put in a lot of work and I've been baking for a really long time and learning different things,
Definitely.
and all of that kind of paid off in that moment when I had like the dessert and I tasted it, and everything kind of played out the way that I expected it to, and it looked the way that I wanted it to look, and everything was just exactly how I imagined it, because I had used what I learned over those many, many years of learning how to bake and put it down onto and actually like used it and use all things that I learned when it comes to like cleaning and measuring and prepping and things like that, and just use all of that knowledge to make something. And that was definitely cool, because not only did I get something that I enjoyed and make something that I considered like amazing, but I didn't do that kind of like out of guessing and kind of like out of luck.
Mhm.
I did it because I had learned and I knew exactly why I was doing everything that I was doing.
And how old were you when you quote unquote perfected that first recipe?
I was 13 and 20. Yeah, I was 13. Yep.
All right, so you're 13, you got this amazing recipe,
Yes.
and you're kind of, you're confident in
Yeah.
your abilities to bake. Now, you have always wanted to do something entrepreneurial, make that quick buck. When did you put things together and start Michael's Dessert?
So I started Michael Desserts when I was 11 years old. And then I kind of like knew some like basic recipes. Like I was making Rice Krispie treats. That was the first thing that I sold, were like Rice Krispie treats. And I just kind of sold those to like people in my community. That's kind of like that is when I did my first vending event. I was selling Rice Krispie treats and cookies and chocolate covered pretzels, and we were just like selling those in like a parking lot. We had a little cart that we kind of rode around the parking lot and stuff like that. Um, so that was
Mhm.
definitely that was my first like
Yeah.
vending event when it comes to like working with Michael's Desserts. And yeah.
And in the early days when you are selling these Rice Krispies treats, I'm sure they weren't. I'm sure they're great, but like, I'm sure that it might have been a little difficult in the beginning to build that connection with the audience, especially so young. Did you ever have to go through struggles with your age in terms of selling and connecting with your community?
I definitely feel like people actually that kind of actually helped me, because I wasn't just like every other person who was selling something, but at the same time, you have a lot of people who it's like kids that have
Yeah,
businesses, but it's mostly just their parents. But I feel like because I was actually in the kitchen, I was actually doing it, and it was actually my business that I really
yeah,
wanted to do, so that I feel like shined through a little bit more than just like a kid who has a business. So I feel like yes, there were other kids there who were selling something, but I was kind of the
yeah,
person who really had a conviction. Yes, my parents helped me and they were there, but they were supporting what I wanted to do instead of kind of like, and they of course they taught me things and
yeah.
kind of like had a hand in what I was doing, but they still
Pushing you.
listened and
Yeah,
helped me, and kind of just like when I wanted to do something, they didn't do it for me, but they told me how to do it and taught me how to do it, and that was something that was really helpful because
taught
it
you.
kind of
Yeah.
put me away from the people who were their parents are doing everything for the business, and what I'm doing where my parents are teaching me how to do what I'm doing.
So you have this baking expertise, right? You
Yes.
have it in your body. You have this kind of expertise for baking. You decide to create Michael's desserts, and you're doing things, around the community. When did that kind of stop being a community, or I think it still is a community thing, but when did it keep growing into something that was more of a national name for Michael Platt?
I feel like since the beginning we kind of started like figuring out how to do like shipping specifically when it comes to like getting the actual product to other people. But I also feel like the news and things like that, because
Yeah,
I guess things kind of snowballed. I had one interview that led to another interview and that led to another interview, and just over time, me like being on TV and things like that and being
yeah,
featured in like magazines and like newspaper and things like that were definitely something that kind of growed my business and growed my name.
yeah,
And I kind of get these waves of people who would buy something. And that was definitely really hard when we were like, well, we can't ship it to you, but we can, like, if you live in Maryland, and that would be like 3% of all people who are actually trying to order something. So it was definitely, we definitely tried to figure out how to
yeah.
use the national, like, news attention to get like and give out national products. So that was definitely something that helped, because it was kind of like learning how to ship and learning how to like actually sell the cupcake as a national
Yeah.
thing. But I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't have the national like news and the national like exposure.
Mhm. All right. So now Michael's Desserts is you have a pretty big name for yourself. You have 10,000 plus followers on Instagram. Uh, you're on. You're the star of a new show called Operation Awesome. I was talking about that in a little bit, but it all kind of started with your grandma who got you into baking, right?
Yes. Yeah, so one of the first things that I remember baking was something that I did with my grandmother. It
Eh,
was just like a really easy cake, and that was definitely really interesting because it was like I kind of like
mhm.
just really enjoyed it. It wasn't something that was super fancy. It wasn't something that was super involved, but it was really fun to just be able to use and just kind of like work with her and learn from her and stuff like that. So I definitely feel like that is one of the most like inspirational memories that I have of baking.
Yeah. And so your mom and your dad were also really big influences for you in keeping you going and supporting you
Yes.
during your baking career, I guess you
Yes.
could kind of say. Um, a lot of kids, though, have interests in things like baking.
Yes.
Maybe it's a sport, but they don't have someone like that to support them, which is obviously super important,
Yes.
especially so young. What are your tips for those kids in how they can, keep moving on even without, a strong support figure?
I feel like just don't try to be like someone else and don't try to like elevate yourself to someone because you're really just going to be like tiring yourself out and you're not going to get there. But kind of take things slow and gradually um level up, but don't like as soon as you get somewhere start trying to get to like start trying to have more. Um and it definitely just like get good at something and then continue to like evolve in what you're doing, but like don't kind of rush yourself or push yourself because it's really not going to help. So just kind of learn how to do something and enjoy doing it as well. That's really important. Is just enjoy what you're doing, but learn how to do it, get good at it, and then once you're comfortable with it, then move on to the next thing. But don't try to kind of like do everything at once or try to like catapult yourself without because you're just going to tire yourself out without like actually knowing what you're doing and actually being comfortable with it, as well as just do what you can, especially when it comes to giving and wanting to help your community. Do what you can because it's gonna help. Like you're still gonna impact someone's life, still gonna impact someone's day, and that's really important. So just don't try to like do too much, and also do what you can because if you can do a little bit, then that's still gonna help, and if you can do a lot, then that's definitely gonna help. But just do everything that you can.
Yep. That's definitely great advice, right? So don't do too much, don't overexhaust yourself,
Yes.
because overexhausted working, if that's a word, is nowhere near as productive as if you worked a little less but worked a little harder during that specific time.
Yes.
Michael, you are, pretty close to being a professional, one of the world's best bakers. And a lot of kids like to do things like baking, sports, collecting, you name it.
Yeah.
But when they're exploring these interests, like as I talked about earlier, the 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 shiny object syndrome kind of wears off on them.
Mhm.
What do you see as some of the biggest obstacles when kids want to explore these hobbies? What are the things that stops them from keeping on going?
I feel like I feel like for me, it's definitely like kind of like the downside of what I was saying about learning something and learning why it works. You kind of you reach a point, especially for me, it was kind of just like a point where I wasn't really creative. I had my recipes, I had like my little arsenal, but I didn't really know what to do with
Mm.
all of those things. And I just kind of had to like sit down and just start thinking about things that I wanted to do and what I have that can make that happen. So just started thinking about things that I really wanted to do. Like I'd see like a dessert that I really wanted to make, and then I basically use what I already learned to do that because I'm making a product that something that I'm proud of that is new to me. Even though I didn't really like learn anything new. Because you want to be able to kind of like you want to be able to learn, you want to be able to learn new things, but you don't want to only learn. You don't want to only learn new things because then you're not ever gonna be able to like see those things turn into something that you're proud
Ah,
of. You're just gonna kind of like have that
mhm.
information and you're not be really gonna be able to do anything with it. So when you get bored, when you kind of reach a point where you don't really know what to do with what you have, then just find something that inspires you and then try your best to do it with what you
Mhm.
have because that is going to kind of give you a new look at what you have and you're going to be much more inspired over time.
You get to the point where you've learned how to make really great frosting, but now you want to actually put the frosting on your cake. So you'll search up something and find a cake that's a computer, and you'll use that to inspire you, and then apply the frosting to that cake. Does
Yeah,
that sound about right?
yeah, yeah, it does.
So when you got started with Michael's Dessert, something really big that you always wanted to have ingrained in the business is giving back to the community. And you
Yes.
did this through like kind of like a you buy one and we'll give one.
Yeah.
Why was that so important to have the community involved in your company?
I definitely feel like just giving someone a cupcake is something that's really important. I grew up and I've always seen, like, we live in really close to DC, so I would grow up and I always saw people who were homeless or people who didn't really have, yeah, people who were homeless basically. And when I first started my business, it was buy one give a, it was like buy a cupcake and we'll give a cupcake. And we really gave like a literal cupcake. We go out to like
Yeah,
parks in DC and we give out a cupcake. And that was something that was
yeah,
really impactful to the people because it wasn't just something that they'd get like a soup or like sandwich, like soup or a sandwich. They would get a cupcake,
yeah,
which is something that was just kind of something that they, it's like, yes, I am
yeah,
hungry. Yes, it's going to, yes, it's still food, but it's also something that makes me feel like you're not just trying to give me something to sustain me, but you're trying to give me something
mhm,
to make me feel happy, to make me enjoy, you know, this moment right now.
like a treat. Yeah,
Because the difference between like food and dessert, you can eat food
yeah,
to sustain yourself. If you're not, if you're hungry, then you can go eat an apple. Like it doesn't have to be good. But when you eat a
yeah,
dessert, it's definitely like you're not. If you eat a dessert and it's not the best dessert, it's not like
yeah,
really good, then like no one's like I'm hungry. Let me go eat, a cookie. They when they eat a cookie, they're eating that cookie because it
yeah,
is delicious and they really want to taste the cookie. So it definitely gives it's like the difference between having food and having a dessert, because food is supposed to sustain you, but a dessert is not supposed to sustain you. It's not supposed to give you,
yeah.
energy for the day. It's just supposed to, taste good and bring you like joy.
Make you a little happier.
Yeah, make you happy. So when I give away a dessert, it is supposed to make them happy. It's not supposed to be the same thing that they get like a sandwich. It's supposed to make their day better. And I felt like that was really just a really kind of like important part, because it's not something that I feel like these people get that often. And I really wanted to be the person to give that to them, and I really just wanted them to have it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And you, of course, advocate for all companies to find some sort of way to give back and
Yes.
get the community involved.
Yes.
For you, that was the buy one and we'll give one program,
Yes.
and that could be different for everyone.
Hmm.
A lot of small entrepreneurs, small businesses, kid entrepreneurs, though they have really tight margins, limited time. What are some ways, easy ways, that they could come up with some sort of similar program to give back?
I feel like just specifically when it comes to food, you can give out your extra food. We have extra food all the time. You just give that out. If you have like a restaurant, especially if you have a restaurant, then you can give out that food. Especially like big chains, like really big like food chains, they throw away tons of food every single day. And they don't have to. They can give that to somebody. But when it comes to like smaller businesses, I feel like just like I said earlier, just doing what you can. If you can do a lot, then do a lot. But at the same time, kind of find a way to not just give someone something, but find a way to teach them how to kind of get that thing on their own. So instead of like giving them, you know, food every single day, maybe give them a way or teach them how to, like a way that where they can get food. So you can use, like, if you have a building, you can use your building to
Yeah.
do a drive. So instead of it being like, here I'm giving you food, it is a place where, or you're kind of like teaching people how to kind of like get their own food. So I feel like just don't, do what you can, of course, and if that is what you can, then that's perfectly fine. But also try to think about a way where you can not just give someone something, but teach them how to
Mhm.
get that thing on their own. If you give a man a fish will eat for a day, if you teach a man a fish will eat for a lifetime. So just kind of like teaching people
Yeah.
how to fish instead of just giving them the fish.
Yeah, as you're talking about that, that came first in my mind, that quote,
Yes.
which is so true.
Yeah.
And following on this, following on this topic of giving back to your community, giving back to the world, you're a huge advocate for the UN global goals.
Yes.
First of all, to those who don't know what they are, what are the UN global goals?
It's basically it's goals on like the broad scale of like whether that be hunger. It's like basically we're supposed to have all these goals completed by I think it was 2030. Um and it's basically goals that
Mhm.
that the United Nations came together to say these are the goals that we want to accomplish by 2030, and they're broad ideas like ending hunger and equal access to like clean water and climate change, and then you basically put out these goals, and then it's basically just kind of like to me it's just something that I look at to kind of inspire me that I'm not alone in this and that there are tons and tons of people, there are entire countries that are working
Yeah.
to accomplish the same thing that I'm trying to accomplish. And yeah, it's basically what the UN global goals are. It's basically just goals that the United Nations came together to decide on, um, to like solve problems that the world is facing.
And we want to solve, I think, with 17, 16 goals
Yeah.
that are all pretty big things,
Yes.
food, equality, peace and justice, I think.
Yes.
Um, and obviously, we're all going to have a huge part in accomplishing those goals. But in the next 10 or so years, when the goals are supposed to be completed, who do you think is going to have the biggest role to play in accomplishing those tasks?
I definitely feel like is the people who make laws. Um, they definitely have, at least right now, they have the biggest like role to play right now because one of the biggest changes that I've seen um, when it comes to changing the world is not just changing, not just like kind of like behind the scenes changing the world, but changing how the world works. You can't really change the world if
Yeah,
you don't know how it works and change how it works. Changing policies and inspiring people to change laws, specifically in your community. I think I've called like my governor like 3 times just to like say something about hunger that is really easy, like school
yeah,
or breakfast in the classroom programs, where basically it basically just like gives breakfast to people to kids who are in school, and it's something that wasn't a law. I
mm,
remember when I was in school, we didn't have breakfast in the classroom until I think I was in like fourth grade, and then after I started learning about hunger, learning about things like that,
ah,
I kind of like learned why that was. It was because an organization called No Get Hungry called the and got a bunch of people together, put out a little like I think it was like a script, and just called their local governor to say, hey, read the script. We want breakfast in the classroom. And then after I kind of learned that they were people who were behind getting that law to happen, it was definitely something that inspired me and was one of the biggest changes that I personally have seen in my community was when we just all get together and just try to get people to not just do something, but to make that thing much more accessible and make that thing much more make it like this is the new standard, this is the law, this is what is going to happen. If you are a kid then you are
yeah,
getting breakfast in the classroom, it doesn't matter. So that is something that was really impactful to me
yeah,
because it wasn't just giving someone something, it was changing completely, like changing the standard. Where if you are a kid, it's not just like I'm going to give you breakfast, I'm going to like do this thing for you. It was completely like, why don't you have breakfast right now? Like it was the most like
yeah,
concentrated version of changing someone's life. It is changing the complete standard, changing everything that they have probably gotten used to, and that is definitely something that has been probably the biggest impact. So I feel like the person who has the most power and the most influence and the most responsibility right now are the people who make the laws and the people who kind of like govern how the world
mhm,
works. Because if you don't do that, then you're not helping. You're just kind of like you have all these people who are doing something,
yeah,
but it's not really going to do much if they stop. But you want to be able, basically, everything that everyone is
yeah.
doing should be to inspire the people and the people who make laws to like enforce what these people are doing as the new standard.
I definitely agree because these are all huge things. Of course, that's why there's only 17 of them.
Yeah.
The 17 biggest problems that
Yes.
we or opportunities that we
Yeah.
can fix for our next generation.
Yes.
Other than the people who change the laws, what kind of role can entrepreneurs, especially our next generation entrepreneurs, what kind of role can they play in accomplishing these global goals?
I feel like I said earlier, just doing what you can, and using your influence to influence people, especially people who are entrepreneurs. A lot of businesses are going to skyrocket. They're going to be the next, of the biggest businesses, the biggest apps, the biggest food chains, the biggest things like that. And just as you're
Mhm.
coming up, um,
Yeah,
then you want to just make sure that like your foundation is in giving, your foundation in your business is in kind of like doing what you can and in giving to your community. um, so don't kind of like do it because it's, trendy. Don't do it because it's, what everyone else is doing, but do it because that is how you want your business
yeah,
to be the entire time. Because a lot of businesses that are coming up right now that you probably don't really think about are going to be the next biggest businesses in the world. And as those
yeah,
businesses get bigger and as they come up and as they get more influence, I want them to like have giving in the forefront of it the entire time, not just doing it once they get big, or not just doing it because they have influence,
yeah.
but doing it even when they don't have influence. Because as they grow, they're going to influence more and more people. But it shouldn't be that they're going to influence all these people and have never influenced the people before, even though the business has existed for a really long time.
Yeah.
But to continue to give even as you are getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
I love that. I love that advice. Always have your company's foundation in giving back.
Yes.
Um, and that'll stick with you.
Yeah.
As big as you get, and the bigger you get, the more you'll be able to give back, which is the
Yes.
best part.
Yes.
Um, I believe that entrepreneurs have a huge role in changing our world, and that's great, great advice. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Michael.
Thank you for having me.